you study, because misinformation is huge. That's a huge issue.
Yeah, we are live now, I guess. Yeah. Hi,
I want to
welcome to
see some
Canada.
of those smells. It looks so exciting. No
Yeah,
tea.
yeah,
Wow,
yeah,
that's
yeah. Welcome to Canada Bangladesh Social Justice Action Research Alliance. We organize critical and courageous conversations about local and global issues connected to equity, fairness, and social justice. I will briefly say a few words in Bangla for our Bengali audience that, what is it that we're going to talk about, and then we can get into the conversation. আজকে আমরা যে বিষয়টা নিয়ে আলাপ করবো সেটা হচ্ছে আহ, আহ, পুরো পৃথিবীতে ইয়াং মানুষদের মধ্যে একটা পলিটিক্যাল অ্যাপাথি দেখা যাচ্ছে যে আমরা মনে করি রাজনৈতিকভাবে পার্টিসিপেট করাটা গুরুত্বপূর্ণ না, কিংবা এই রাজনৈতিকভাবে পার্টিসিপেট না করার পিছনে কোন ধরনের পলিটিক্যাল ইকোনমি কাজ করছে, এর পিছনে নিও লিবারাল বা নব্যদের অর্থনীতির কোনো ভূমিকা রয়েছে কিনা, আমেরিকায় কোন ধরনের বাস্তবতা রয়েছে, এই সবগুলো বিষয় নিয়ে আমরা কথা বলবো। এবং আজকে আমাদের গেস্ট প্রফেসর ডেনিস রব, উনি পিয়ার্স কলেজে পড়ান এবং ওনার ছাত্রছাত্রীরা আমাদের কথাগুলো শুনছেন। সো we will have a very exciting conversation. What I just said, that we'll talk about the political apathy among young people in the United States and around the world, and if there's any connection with neoliberalism. And our guest is Professor Denise Robb, and but we know that Professor Robb is an exciting person. She has had a long career in teaching, and also she was a stand-up comedian at one point in time, I think. So
right. That means I can be the president of Ukraine.
Exactly. So I don't know. That's. I mean, my brothers and sisters and my students tell me that my sense of humor is really blunt, so I don't really have it at all. Without further ado, Professor Denise Robb, can the first question to you, if you could introduce to our audience from the other side of the world a bit about yourself and how you took interest in political science, interested in being an educator, and also your engagement. You have been an activist, you are an educator, you have been in the scene of being a stand-up comedian. That's very varied. Could you speak about that, please?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Denise Robb. I began my activism as a kid. The anti-nuclear movement was very big when I was a kid, and I used to go in. I always tell my students about how I used to get arrested but I also tell them, you shouldn't follow in my footsteps. I mean, maybe you should, but be careful because it can hurt your financial aid. So, but I used to get arrested. I did a lot of union activism, working with SEIU, campaign finance reform, universal health care, immigration rights. This is stuff that I've been involved in my whole life. But I did stand-up comedy, and I also always had some kind of a job, often a job I hated, but um, often in the legal field, doing paralegal or legal assistant work. And then I did stand up for a while. I didn't make a huge living. I traveled around the world a little bit, doing comedy. Did a lot of shows in the United States, traveling around the United States, and did some television, but not enough to support myself. And I always had these jobs I hated. And I decided to go back to school later in my 30s. And I had this professor at community college who inspired me at Santa Monica College, and Dr. Schultz. And she was funny, and like stand up funny, really funny. And she was smart. And students tend to not think politics has anything to do with their life. They tend not to think it's important or interesting. And I always thought, are you crazy? Do you understand? I do this every day in class. I'm like, do you notice how this has to do with you? Do you see how this works in your life? We're talking about the Supreme Court, and this is a decision, like abortion, for example. You may not be able to have one soon. This is going to affect you every day. Something happens, and you're oblivious to it. And I thought she had a way of bringing people in and getting them excited about politics. And I said to her after class one day, how do I do what you're doing? And she said, well, get a PhD. And I had just starting my AA, and I said, ugh. She said, well, it's easier to get a job. Even if you want to teach community college, it's easier to get a job with a PhD. So I went to UC Irvine after I finished Santa Monica. I'd gone to UCLA, dropped out a few times, went to Santa Monica, Cal State LA, then UC Irvine for my master's and for my PhD. And I worked almost the whole time except in graduate school because my parents passed away. As far as they know, I didn't have any. I do now. I didn't have kids. I didn't finish college. They loved me, but they didn't get to see me do any of the things that they probably wished I had done, because I did them all later. Yeah, and then I got a job at Pierce College the same year I graduated with my PhD, and the same year I had a baby, which was 2011. So 10 years ago. And, I like it more than stand up. It's the best job. I feel so lucky every single day. I'm just so blessed to be able to help try to inspire young people, teach them a little bit about politics and the world and why it's important, and make them laugh too, which just happens naturally. So it's really a win-win situation for me. I mean, I don't, we'll see how they feel, but hopefully not too bad for them.
I have taught for a very long time economics, and this you as a political scientist, you perfectly understand that the economic syllabus. I mean, I've taught in the British education system, so where the syllabus and everything comes from Cambridge University in Bangladesh. So we teach what are the advantages of market economy, profit maximization, yay, free market economy, and all of that. And we don't teach political economy and all of that. So neoliberalism and all the way. So the word political economy almost sounds like phrase. What does it mean? How is politics connected to economics, right? So and also
inextricable. They're inextricable. I remember being told in I think it was a macroeconomics class. I've only had a couple of economics classes, but they were saying how if it's cheaper to move everything to another country, that's just a great situation. And I'd raise my hand and go, what about the employees? What if, they can retire. I'm like, well, what if they're 30, 40, 50? They're not ready to retire. Well, they can be retrained. Oh, great. I just see a man in his 60s going, oh, I guess I'll go back to school now. There was no they didn't even talk about it. It was so cold and
Hmm.
calculating. I know not all professors teach that type of economics, but it seemed divorced from reality.
Yeah, yeah, and the magical. Now it's possible to talk, but I think back in my days when I was undergrad or grad in my grad school, if you would talk about that, neoliberal economics, this paradigm, because obviously it does not only work in one subject, it's in our mindset and everything. My first question to you is that you are teaching in America, and I have taught in Bangladesh, and now I'm working here, and also I'm teaching here. Um, have you seen that the young people, the political apathy among young people is that, okay, what's the point of taking part in politics, and why is it important? So what is your experience, and what do you think some of the reasons behind this apathy?
I don't know if they'd even take it if it wasn't required. I teach the Constitution. I read the Constitution, every word, and we stop and we talk about each section. And I think that they feel it doesn't really matter. And I have to say, when I teach them about the Electoral College, I reaffirm that. But I quickly correct them and say it's not only about the president. You might find your city council person or your school board member, your community. We have community college boards in California. Those maybe even affect you even more. They determine a lot about your current life right now as a community college student. But a lot of times they feel like it doesn't matter, especially like if you're a Republican in California, your vote really doesn't matter for president because of the Electoral College. Anyone who doesn't know, the person who wins the most votes for the state, even if it's by one vote, gets all the electoral votes in all but except two states. So you get all of them. So in California, even if Republicans, they're about a quarter of the population, a little bit more, but they don't get any electoral votes at all. However, we have direct democracy in California, and this is one of the only things that perks them up. I go, "Do you know why we got legalized marijuana?" And they're like, oh, or I'll ask them, "Did you know? Do you know if marijuana is legal?" Like, oh, oh, that's one of the only things that all of a sudden everybody's like, "Oh, I know about that." And it used to be medical marijuana because they legalized that first. But that's direct democracy because we let people directly vote for propositions. And the recall that we just had, I mean, our governor got reelected, stayed governor. He won the recall by something like 70%. But Arnold Schwarzenegger became our governor because the voters didn't like our previous governor. So we have the ability to get rid of people before they're done with their term. We can overturn laws in California, and we can create our own laws, some of which are unconstitutional and kind of nutty, but we have the ability to put things on the ballot, get signatures. You can even create your own political party if you can get enough signatures. So there is power. And what I always say to them is, you may think, I think Ralph Nader said, oh, actually, I think it was Plutarch before then. But basically, if you don't have to be involved in politics, you can check out of politics, but politics is not going to check out on you. That's a very non-eloquent way to say it, but it's going to affect your life no matter what. You can sleep, you could take a nap, and something has affected your life, and sometimes in a really big way. A lot of our students are undocumented immigrants. So when Trump got elected, I literally canceled my classes, and we had class, but we sat in circles. I put everyone in a circle because a lot of my students were crying because he had said all these nasty things about immigrants. And then he got rid of DACA. I mean, it's still in the courts, but, you know, one president gives us DACA, one president takes away DACA. There's really no comprehensive immigration plan. So we sat in a circle, and students would say, "I'm afraid my father's going to get deported. I'm afraid I'm going to get deported." And a couple students were like, "I love Trump," and I was like, "Okay, you could talk about that too." I mean, it's it's an educational atmosphere. We're not a political place. So I want my students to feel free to express whatever they want to express, as long as they're not, insulting anyone or hurting anyone. I want them to feel comfortable, because we do have mostly Democrats, but we have some Republicans, some Greens, some Libertarians, and I bring in speakers from all those different parties to talk to the students about their party, and I divide the class up randomly so they learn about the different parties. But my goal is to let them realize that they may think it doesn't matter, but it does
So obviously I use it in my research too, is that trying to understand, like for instance, the document, the Lewis Powell memoranda, is that, that the American corporations is under attack. The Powell memoranda, the secret memoranda, everybody talks about the neoliberal beginning in the 1970s, or the crisis of democracy, where, who was the guy who talked about crisis of civilization? Huntington. Yeah, Huntington.
Samuel Huntington. It goes actually back further. I was looking into the beginning of it was the Austrian exiles, but we had a period. All right, neoliberalism. I have some notes about this I wanted to mention.
So if we would place the question like this, that one might argue that today the education that we get, that presents to our students that, well, politics, you don't have to worry about it, this is not your thing, it's the politician's job. And also a huge defunding of a lot of liberal social science departments like political science, philosophy. Even Barack Obama himself, once he said that, well, don't major in art history, major in some technical degree and earn money and etc. Right? So, do you think that the neoliberal assault on education was designed to depoliticize education, and that's why we see a lot of political apathy among our young students? Like, okay, I don't care, how is it connected to my life?
I think there's a strain of this in our very founding of our history, and I don't know. I don't think it. I don't think people get together and go, "Oh, how can we destroy destroy the educational system?" First, my students don't know what neoliberalism is yet. We haven't talked about it, I'm sorry to say. But let me explain a little bit first, because I want them to understand what we're talking about, and your students as well. Well, maybe yours already know. But it sees competition as the defining characteristic of human relations. So, for example, you become a consumer no matter what you do. And the whole idea of, we did talk about democratic socialism. Think of Bernie Sanders. I know you all know Bernie Sanders. So think of Bernie Sanders, who's always talking about the 1%. What about the 1% of everything? And the rest of people have nothing. The idea in Europe after the war is, let's provide universal health care for everyone. Let's provide a lot of benefits, free education in many countries, free college, something that we used to have, but we don't have in California anymore. This idea that not communism. A lot of people confuse what social democrats have in Europe, and they say it's communist, and there's this fear of communism, and this has been going throughout our country ever since Russia and China, this fear that they're going to take over, so we have to explain how evil they are. It's not about the government controlling everything. I just was thinking of a woman yesterday who I met, I gave her a couch, and she said to me, I try so hard to, because what's the point? I'm going to have a 2-hour argument with a woman I gave a couch to, but she says, isn't it terrible? What's going on? And I would have said, yes, the coronavirus is terrible. Yes, Biden can't pass his agenda, but I had a feeling that wasn't what she was getting at. And she said, isn't it terrible? And I said, I was so good. As I get older, I'm getting better at this. I said, oh yeah, it's terrible. And she goes, those guns, the communists are taking our guns. And she went on and on about how she can't have her guns, and she doesn't want to wear a mask, and all. And I was like, I said, the Supreme Court is about to expand your gun rights because they're about to make a decision about open carry. We could talk about that for a whole episode, but those of you out there just know the Supreme Court is about to rule on open carry gun rights and maybe get rid of a lot of our gun control laws. And so she has nothing to worry about. Her Second Amendment is free. But anyway, this whole idea of neoliberalism, that everything is about consumers and market, and we don't really need, it's like climate change. We're dealing with it in a market approach now because it's so hard for us to pass anything else. So, businesses are finding that actually solar is a good idea, and electric cars, you can make money selling electric cars, and some subsidies by the government. But basically, it takes a market approach, a capitalistic approach to politics, and infuses it in every part of our lives. And so Naomi Klein, in her book, The Shock Doctrine, said things like, she said, the Iraq War was meant to distract us so that more neoliberal policies could be implemented when nobody is paying attention. Watch the shiny object. Don't pay attention. Woo! Don't see what's going on. While in the meantime, the Supreme Court started making decisions. Do you mind if I ramble a little bit? I'm sorry. Okay, because I was just taught my students about this, so some of you out there will know that the Supreme Court, just because it's in the Constitution, we like to think that we're protected. So the 14th Amendment is supposed to protect, it was meant to protect former slaves. It gives them citizenship. And if you're born in this country, you're a citizen, and it has the Equal Protection Clause that says everyone has to be treated equally. And it's been used more recently to protect women's rights. It's been used to protect gay people's rights, transgender rights. And now we have some protections thanks to the interpretation of the 14th Amendment. But there was a time, the first time they used the 14th Amendment was in the slaughterhouse cases. And that's when they said it was about slaughtering in Louisiana, slaughtering animals. And the government put some health and safety regulations, and the slaughterhouse corporations got very angry. And they said, you know what? You're violating our 14th Amendment equal protection right to profit, to be free from regulation. And this strain is in early American politics. The whole idea of the individual rights and the states' rights. It's in the 10th Amendment, just a couple years after our original Constitution. And it's in this strain of, rugged individualism. Corporations are people. That's from the 1880s. The Supreme Court deemed that corporations are really the same as people. And this whole strain, the slaughterhouse cases, they argued the 14th Amendment not about what it was meant for, but they said it was about the freedom of businesses to practice their business without being targeted. They said, you're targeting the slaughterhouse businesses. You're not treating everyone equally. And they lost, but they only lost by one vote. And that began a series of Supreme Court cases where they started finding in favor of businesses. When FDR, after the Great Depression, said, let's have regulations. Let's regulate. Let's have rights for employees. Let's regulate employers. Let's regulate health and safety because people were dying in their jobs. The Supreme Court kept striking his stuff down. And a lot of times they said it was based on the 14th Amendment. And people are going crazy. They fought so hard to get the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment to end slavery and have equal protection. And here we get the Supreme Court.
Could you, sorry, Professor Robb, could you tell us for Bangladeshi audience that what is 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment is?
Yeah, they're called the Civil Rights Amendments because we fought the Civil War, 1860 to 1865, and then we ended slavery with the 13th Amendment right after the Civil War. And then in the 14th Amendment, we have equal protection. Everyone has to be treated equally. And of course, they granted males, they use the word male for the first time. Even though women fought for the civil rights, they purposely said only men would have the right to vote, and women didn't get the right to vote for 50 more years. So it gave men the right to vote and equal protection, citizenship clause. If you're born in this country, you're a citizen. Due process clause, you're going to have fair treatment. And then it we had a brief period of Reconstruction where the federal government enforced, uh, things like the early Civil Rights Act, and started having some African American legislators, and we started to see a little bit of freedom. But then they didn't want to, they were worried about another civil war, and they, even right after Lincoln, we had Andrew Johnson, who was an open racist. So we kind of went backwards, and the Supreme Court is only as good as whoever appoints them. So if a Supreme Court is appointed by racist presidents, you get a racist Supreme Court. And we had that. And we also had this element of libertarianism, which you find in current justices like Neil Gorsuch, people who believe that businesses are people, corporations are people, and they should have freedom. And I always tell my students, how do you define, freedom? And some of them are like, just leave me alone. There's different concepts of freedom. The idea to have my body, physical autonomy, abortion rights, or I can be gay if I want, or trans, it's not your business. But then this idea that no regulation, libertarians call taxation slavery. You can see literature on that. And also I've had speakers come to my class and say to my students, taxation is slavery. And I'm like, well, it's not actually. I mean, it's kind of insulting to actual slavery. And they went, no, it's the same thing. You have enslaved me by telling me, that my corporation can't do certain things, can't go certain places, can't operate certain ways, and this is slavery. So this idea that corporations should be free, there's another concept of freedom that a democratic socialist would have. Are you free if you have no home? Are you free if you have no food? Yes, you're free to sleep under a bridge and starve to death with no health care. Is that freedom? And a libertarian perspective, a neoliberal perspective, would say, you just didn't work hard enough. This is something that was said to me many times by libertarians, is you got to get up early. You got to work hard. Don't major in, what did Obama say? Don't major in
Art
poetry.
history. Don't major in art history.
Don't major in, they say,
Social
don't major in
sciences.
philosophy. Don't major
Yeah.
in art history. I mean, it's
Hmm.
true. You're going to have a harder time getting a job, but so that's, that's too bad. I think you should probably get more money for art history than being a stockbroker. I can't see.
Yeah,
I
I'm
can't see that
and
adding the value.
who's the guy, the Goldman Sachs guy, who was the president, the chairman or head of Goldman Sachs after the 2008 financial crash. He said that the employees, when American economy was going through such a recession, he argued the people in Goldman Sachs are some of the most productive people in the world. Mind you, that we understand from political economy that the entire financial system is parasitic. It's not productive. Like a farmer goes in the field, produces tomato or vegetables, they're producing something that you're eating. But in the financial
That's the worst
system,
paying job.
yeah, and you look at California. I mean, your backyard, that all the migrant workers, undocumented workers, cutting our lettuce, cutting our vegetables. How are we treating them? I mean,
Yeah, we have laws that say child labor is illegal unless you work on a farm.
Mhm.
We had
Yeah,
someone from the farm workers union was talking about how, you can be a little kid and have to work in the farm, because
yeah.
that was like a loophole they worked out. I went in my garden for an hour to pick
Mm.
some apples and avocados and tomatoes. 1 hour. And it wasn't even 110 degrees like it gets, in the Central Valley. And I was thinking while I was picking a bowl, just a bowl to make some, apple pie and guacamole. And I was like, There are people that do this all day long for not great pay, maybe no benefits at all. And it
Mhm.
amazes me that they should be the most important. They should be the most important people. They
Yeah,
should be the
yeah,
revered people in this
yeah.
society. It's everything's so strangely backwards.
Yeah, and there's a wonderful book by a very awesome economist, Matsukato. She wrote a book. It's called "The Value of Everything." Is that from 1970s onward, we started valuing financial intermediaries as part of the GDP. And now, where you and I live, I mean, in the global digital economy, I mean, my dissertation looks into disinformation and misinformation and political polarization. Is that you and I literally are a space, no longer an individual, to be colonized. Your life has to be converted into data for producing what? Do you see what I mean? So,
This is happening in our okay, so when you first said, "I wanna talk about neoliberalism," and I was thinking,
Mhm,
"Okay, what would I say?" And I thought, well, and education, and I was thinking,
mhm,
well, private schools for sure, and
mhm,
also, when they have ads at the schools. I remember
mhm,
going to some college somewhere, and it said, like, "Sponsored by Tropicana," and I was like,
mhm.
"The school is sponsored." Well, I hope they don't go under because that's the end of your education.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about community college, and there's certain things that have been happening lately that
Mhm,
really made me think about what you said. And one of them is that we have data for everything now. So
mhm,
enrollment's a little bit down because of
mhm.
the pandemic and all the problems. And a lot of students really don't want to, this is not their idea of an ideal education. They want to be in person. And thank God I've been teaching in person this semester a little bit, two classes. But this idea that we have to turn everything into data. We used to be community college. You could be 18, you could be 50, you could be 80, and you take education should be a lifelong thing. You don't need to always get degrees. You could just take classes for your edification of your mind. But we kind of are getting away from that. We've made it so students can't keep taking a class over and over. And in the theater department, that means there's some actors who like to keep acting and they don't want them to do that. So we have limits on that. We have limits on units. If you start taking too many units, and I didn't even figure out what I was doing till my 40s. So I get it when a student says to me, I'm undecided, I'm not sure. Now they want them to declare a major as they enter. Oh my God. When I was 18, I had never heard of an anthropology class. Maybe heard of it, but I didn't know what sociology, anthropology. I never had economics. I maybe I'd want to be those things, but when I'm 17 or 18, it's a buffet. That's why we have general education. You take a little of anthropology and a little sociology and a little math and little chemistry, and you're like, I think I want a little more of this one until you find your way. And that could take a while, but you don't get money at the end. If you take too many units, the money's gone. So that is part of the idea that, we talk about getting them in and out. You get free college, which is great now. In California, we have it. It doesn't look like it's going to happen at the federal level. Joe Manchin, thank you so much. But it looks like we're going to, we have it in California for 2 years. But what if it's 3 years or 4 years? What if it's like me, where I'm working and I go to school part time? No, you don't qualify for a lot of things. So it's the in and out. Come on, let's churn, and churn it out. It's like a business. Um, as some professors have said to me, where's the community in community college? So choosing a degree immediately, a rush to graduate, limiting courses, older learners. We do have some classes for older learners, but they're not all really meant for that. It's a special program called Encore. Um, so, oh yeah, equity versus equality. We talk a lot about equity, because the visual image of that we've been talking a lot, we talk a lot about this at school, is equality. We treat you all the same. Equity is an understanding that some people like Trump start out with millions. By the time he was 10 years old, he was a millionaire. And the rest of us, by the time we're 10 years old, we're, trying not to eat glue or paint, or I don't know. We're just figuring out what math is and how to write our name. He's a millionaire with servants. So equity means, it's like a ladder, so that if he's here already, I get a ladder to help me so that I can be here as well. And that is a really important thing that neoliberalism doesn't really deal with. It just says we're all equal. You just didn't get up early enough. Well, no, maybe you started out much further ahead than everyone else. And if you don't have a job, it's your fault. I wanted to talk about the Black Code for a moment, if that's okay. The Black Code in the 1800s in the South were laws meant to keep people down. After slavery, it was meant to keep slaves. So even though we got rid of slavery, they had these laws like the convict surety bond law and enticement laws, where we didn't they were supposedly race neutral laws, but they were applied only to Black people. And immigrants were able to thrive because of this, because these laws were not applied to white immigrants. So they were able to take a better job. We didn't let you get a better job if you had a job. If you were doing a seasonal job, then we nail you for vagrancy. Like if you were picking cotton, which was a common job for former slaves. And we found you to be vagrant. We, the sheriff of the southern town, they'd put you in jail, or they'd let you work for free for 20 years for your former master, or for someone that you would call your master. It wasn't called slavery. This is a loophole in the 13th Amendment. It says slavery is abolished except for punishment for a crime.
Yeah.
And we still use that, free labor, but we also used it to keep Black people from ever voting again.
Yeah, and also particularly from Bangladesh, I think is very important, and I would like you to talk about it. Is that Bangladesh being a British colony for 200 years, we put America on a pedestal. We think that everything in America is the best and the greatest, ever that has existed under the sun. And I don't think I would know a lot about this if I did not come to the global north for education. I don't think I would know. I would understand. And Henry Giroux talks about it, is that there is a reason why people are intentionally kept ignorant. I mean, in Bangladesh to this day, we teach our students that Columbus discovered America to this day. So could you speak to, let's say, Bangladeshi audience, students, is that, who was somebody, Hitler sent somebody to America to understand how the racism is maintained here. He went back and he said to Hitler,
Yes.
is that the racism, even the Nazis thought the racism in America is violent. Could you speak about
Oh,
that,
he
please?
admired, I just taught my students that in class yesterday.
Yeah,
Hitler admired us. He learned from us. He
yeah,
learned from us. So, this, I'm not saying we have much to be admired.
yeah.
We have a great constitution that I call aspirational, because it keeps getting better.
Mhm,
And even if we don't always abide by it, like only Congress can declare war, and we haven't really paid attention to that in,
mhm,
80 years. But it is an aspirational document. The Declaration of Independence is quite lovely. And we do have democracy. There's plenty of countries where people are just shot for saying what they think. Or, in Russia, you'd be thrown off a building if you want to run for office, or
mhm,
poisoned. And
mhm,
I don't even know how Navalny's still alive. He just keeps coming back, different colors from poison. And there he is again.
mhm.
But I know that if I was married to him, I would have left him long ago, because he's not long for this world. But anyway, that's another story. Um, but yeah, I mean, this reminds me of, this is the idea of critical race theory. This is not, critical race theory is not anything we teach 10-year-olds in elementary school. Critical race theory from the proponent and the author of critical race theory explains that it is something we teach in law school that has to do with looking at things from a lens of racism and looking at things in a specific way, way too complicated and and elevated for a 10-year-old or a 5-year-old to understand. But what they do teach now that they didn't teach, we don't celebrate Columbus Day. I'm some people do, but it wasn't a holiday at our school. Um, it's not what it was because when I was a kid, I didn't really learn much about the Holocaust. I didn't learn much about slavery, or we were taught in California that the missions and the priests were these, hallowed figures, and they were so amazing, and they brought so much to the poor Indians. And I'm not that old, but that's what they taught us. And then I get to college, mind blown. Oh my goodness, I learned so much. And now kids are learning, not that you should feel guilty for being white. That's what all the parents at the school board are freaking out about. You're going to make my kid feel bad about who he is. Your kid is going to have a worthless education if he doesn't know where we came from. We need to know where we came from. We need to know that our country was built on slavery. Our economy became the greatest. We're still, the superpower of the world because we had hundreds of years of free labor. Let's see how your bank account looks if you get someone to do everything for you for your entire life. You'll probably do very well. Not so good for the person, but this is who we are, and we can't learn from it and get better if we ignore it. If nobody's going to understand why police officers target Black people unless they understand our history of racism and how it's not something that's in the past. It's better than it was, a lot better than it was in 1800 and 1860 and 1950. But we have the black code I was just talking to you about in Florida, where they take away all over the South, where they take away a person's right to vote forever if you commit a felony. They just passed a law to get rid of it a few years ago, and they're still fighting it in courts. Amendment 4. That was a black code law. So we still have the black code. California doesn't have that. We let felons vote once they've served their time. But many states don't. And this was a way of keeping Black people. You can arrest them falsely, and then you accuse them of a felony. They go to prison, and then they can never vote again. And you can wipe out the right of a Black person to vote for a majority of Black people in your state.
Do you think that when you teach your students, they understand or they recognize? I once read it somewhere is that just because you are white doesn't mean that your life hasn't been hard.
Well, that's true.
Yeah,
That's true.
but
I mean, but it doesn't mean that you understand the same type of discrimination.
yeah. But what's really insightful in that simple poster that says that your life hasn't been hard because you are white.
Mm-hmm.
But for the vast majority who are not white, they haven't done anything.
Right.
My choice is that I am not a white man, or my name is unmistakably a Muslim name.
Yeah.
I mean, so when you were saying that in 1800s, the situation, I would like you to consider this, is right now we are heading towards a myth of machine neutrality. Tell me what you go through where you don't face machine. You go to the airport, you scan your passport, the surveillance system that you have, the cameras and everything placed there. In America right now, we have artificially intelligent models that decides, let's say I have been caught with marijuana and a white man has been caught with marijuana. You don't have time to hire a judge to see what is the risk of committing the crime again. Recidivism, right? Just because I am not a white man, the algorithm, the model will say, this person has a chance of committing the crime again. I'll be given higher sentences as opposed to a white man. Now, they
Mhm.
will say, well, I haven't done it. The machine has done it. But the machine has been trained based on biased, racist data. The world that it is learning from is racist. So,
Yeah.
we're heading towards this myth of machine neutrality. Well, people could be racist, but the computer is not racist. But also, have you thought about it that see, more and more our life, to the extent it is mediated by, like now you and I are speaking through a technological system, and I'm speaking in English. Even if I didn't speak in English, even if I spoke in Bangla, the all powerful algorithm is listening to what I am saying and making a profile about my political ideology. That,
Oh, yeah.
oh, what is this guy's political position? Hence, I mean, it was a huge, big news that Facebook now can decide what is your political ideology based on the kind of content you post, the kind of friends that you have. So,
Oh,
are
they know.
we?
They know. They know. I was looking at cat food the other day,
Yeah.
and I bought it, and I don't know, they assumed I wanted to buy it again and again and again from different sources. It just kept popping up no matter where I was going. I'd be reading an article in the New York Times, and the cat food would cover my screen. So yes, the machines are, and also the machines have taken away a lot of jobs, a lot of entry level jobs, and even beyond entry level jobs. So yeah, it hasn't been great, but this is one of the things Andrew Yang talked about as presidential candidate, is
Yeah.
that one of the reasons he said, I know people think it's communism, but one of the reasons he wanted a universal basic income is because there are machines that are now doing the things that we do. And then to the other point, which is the data, is neutral. Well, in Brown versus Board of Education, that was the first time when we actually decided that we should use data, because in the courts they often ask for intent, and when they want intent, you're screwed, because if you say this person discriminated against me and I know that that's why they did, it's pretty rare that your boss writes a post-it note and says, I'm going to fire you because you're a woman or because you're black. I just want you to know that. No, they don't do that. They'll just cut your hours and start treating you differently, and maybe little microaggressions against you. And then pretty soon you've lost your job. But if you can show data, dispassionate statistical data, that something keeps happening to Black people or to women or to Asians or whatever group more than it happens to the general population, this is a basis for a 14th Amendment civil rights lawsuit. So we do use data to prove discrimination as well. I mean, this whole idea that we just happen to pull over Black people because of they're committing the most crimes. We've done a lot of studies that have shown police officers, not me doing the studies, other people, research universities doing studies that show implicit bias, that when they flash pictures really quickly of a white person and a Black person and they ask you a question and you just are supposed to just quickly hit the button, they've shown implicit bias time and time again. So it's not that there's a group of people that are committing more crimes, it's that they're being prosecuted more harshly.
Yeah.
And also Obama, one of the first things he did, I know he is a bit neoliberal, and I mean, I'm pretty far out there, but I found him to be a conservative Democrat. Although I worked on his campaign, I did a stand-up show, I raised money for him, um, and I was at his inauguration, and I've never cried that much in my life. It was beautiful. But I also am aware that the kind of person that I think would make a good president,
Mhm.
maybe a Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, but when we speak about Obama, I think we often forget the fact. And in Bangladesh, because I'm from Bangladesh, and we have a prime minister in Canada. I mean, especially all the people. Oh my God, look at him! He's so handsome. It's like, how the hell does it matter? He's handsome. How the hell does it have to do with his policy or his politics?
You know
You
why
know what I mean?
people vote? They vote, they just they find this out over and over again. Same thing. I was just talking to the students about this. They vote for someone they want to have a beer with. And I always say, I don't want to have a beer. The president's not going to have a beer with me. I don't want
Mhm.
to have a beer with him. I don't want to have tea with him. I don't want him. I don't want him to be I don't want him to be a regular guy. I don't even want to understand him. I want him to be so smart that I have to grab a dictionary every time he gives a speech, because that's not what I look for in a president. But I am not the average voter. The average voter wants someone they can have a beer with, someone they can hang out with.
Yeah, I think that's the trick that, let's say, I mean, and this is what is very relevant at the time. Like, for instance, I'm going to have a conversation with a professor of John Hopkins on the 19th. He worked in the American intelligence community for a long time. Now he's a professor. So we were discussing that, right now we are going through an episode of human history that human beings have never lived in informational civilization. We have lived in all kinds of time, but now, 2021, it's impossible for anybody to be able to wade through the oceans of information that you're bombarded with. And researchers in my field, they say that we are going through a phase called reality vertigo. We don't know what to trust anymore. Our sense of reality is so distorted. Like, do you remember that, during the Hillary campaign, somebody drove a truck like some 1,000 miles because he believed that Hillary runs some kind of
A pedophile
chain?
ring in a pizza
Yeah,
place,
yeah,
and he
yeah,
brought a gun into the pizza place. Now,
yeah.
what I tell my students is, it's kind of a nice guy in some ways, because think about it, he wanted to save the children. So he had a good intention, but he was an idiot, and he believed fake news. One of the things we talk about is, how do you tell real news from fake news? So I'm always teaching my students, and I have them write about ways to tell what a fake website is, because you're going to get taken. You're going to believe something is real when it's not, because you may not know all the ways to determine. And that is so important. I'm going to a quieter room because they're doing construction next door. All right, this is quieter. So yeah, so people often don't know how to tell real from fake news, so they believe all kinds of nonsense. um, right now, this hasn't changed. That guy was just one example. Look
Yeah,
at the
and
people in January 6th, the terrorists storming the Capitol,
so
who are sure
so
that he's still president.
So, don't you think right now, more than ever in the history of education, we need to go back to political science? We need to go back to philosophy. We need to go back to sociology. Because, I mean, Trump is not going to come to think for you, or, any other president. I mean, if you don't think for yourself, we are in a bit of a trouble. We,
Yeah,
we, we are
I
screwed, to be
know.
very honest.
I get very depressed. I generally don't get depressed. I'm generally
Mhm.
pretty optimistic. But when I think about, how do you combat a, an alternative universe of news? Right now, we have um, different worlds of news. When I watch Fox News to see what they're talking about, I'm quite shocked that they're still talking about Hillary's emails, and they're still talking about Hunter Biden and all of this. They're not even talking about Build Back Better or any of the things that are going on, or the climate summit. In the daytime, they have normal news, but at nighttime they have these very strange people. The new the guy from Florida, who's the new Surgeon General, who's in charge of COVID, he's part of a crazy doctor organization where they believe that certain illnesses you have, like if you have cancer, you were having sex with demons, and just things that my students would go, oh, come on. And this is an organization he's a part of, and he's now part of the government in Florida. I know Florida is known as being kind of weird, but this is much weirder than I've ever imagined. The fake news and the fact that 70% of Republicans think Trump is still the president it might eliminate the whole purpose of our democracy, which is a peaceful transfer of power. And we can easily become one of those governments that we always make fun of.
Yeah. Now think about this, and then I want you to, I want really to comment on it. Is when at a time like this, when we are said that if you don't have a technical degree and this and that, you're doomed, and go there. All right, we go there, and then what happens is now we just have found out that Facebook spends 84% of its budget, 84% of its budget to fight disinformation, misinformation, fake news in the United States. And for the rest of the world, 14%. Now, and then I want you to comment on this, is that this conflict, this polarization is fundamentally profitable. Capitalism is not a thing, but a relationship. And in the history of humanity, you can't find one institution like racism as successful. There are different kinds of institutions, sexism, nationalism, all different kinds of things. But this is where I think, in academia, when we teach, oh, it's a struggle. I'm not saying there isn't any class struggle. There is class struggle. But the way Facebook or the digital capitalism is showing that, oh, in Bangladesh, where I'm from, we have over 1 million Rohingya refugee. When Facebook was used for ethnic cleansing in Myanmar, it didn't matter. When Facebook was used to decimate democracy in the United States in 2016 election, it didn't matter because it was for the white supremacists. So I asked this question when you were just saying that, this crazy guy, part of the doctoring, etc. Think about the history. Tuskegee case, the AIDS matter, the welfare mamas, right? The whole point of white supremacy and the capitalism and the colonialism and the imperialism has always been built on lies. It's built on lies. So now, I mean, I am.
So I have something very positive to say
Mhm,
about that.
mhm,
Things are changing. Do
mhm,
you know why white males especially, and women too, but why a lot of white people are really freaked out and upset and going to school board meetings for the first time in their lives and running for office because they're up in arms about teaching history? Because our country's becoming more, the United States is becoming more diverse. So diverse. Oh, I forgot to get my figures about that, but something like 26% of the vote for Biden in Georgia were young people, and large populations of African Americans are changing so that these white supremacist states, these states that have traditionally had, statues honoring people from the Confederate soldiers, they're coming down. People are marching. Everyone all of a sudden realized that Black lives matter. I thought that was obvious from the day I was born. I was like, well, of course. But apparently it's catching on that Black lives actually matter. We are becoming a diverse country. We're becoming a less homophobic country. We're becoming a little by little less racist country. And as our country becomes more and more diverse, there's a fear from white people, especially the people who have always had, even if you're a poor white person, you could say, well, I'm a poor white person, but I'm somehow superior to all those other people. And they're starting to feel like, wait, I don't even have that now. So that's causing them to freak out. A lot of people, there's a lot of poverty, a lot of white people that are in poverty. So I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm just saying it's like what leveled the whole idea of social Darwinism, the whole idea that white people were naturally superior, got leveled in the Great Depression when they lost everything. And they went, oh, I guess maybe I'm not, maybe this isn't the right theory because I know I'm superior. And how is it I'm broke? So as the economy causes hardship even for wealthier people, and as our country becomes more diverse, and there's a recent study at Harvard from a few months ago that showed young people are more politically active than ever before, and they're more hopeful. So this this is one of my favorite things I've ever read. This idea that they're starting to feel hopeful and they're starting to feel positive again. And they're starting to feel like maybe they can make a difference. So I think things are changing. I think things are getting better. And I think just the idea that the universal basic income is being talked
Mhm.
about by normal people, the idea that Bernie Sanders, someone that I have loved and admired since I was a kid, but nobody ever took seriously as a presidential candidate, literally almost got the nomination. And that, there's people like Alexandria
The
Ocasio-Cortez.
the quads, the squad, like
That's,
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ayanna Presley, Ilhan Omar, Rashida
there's a
Tlaib. I
lot
mean,
of them, a lot
I
of,
mean,
yeah, we
who
have
would have
Muslim
thought?
women, we have Native Americans. We have a Native American in charge of our public lands.
Yeah,
How
and
about
and
that?
and we have, for the first time in the history of Newark, we have a Bangladeshi Muslim woman elected. I mean, I'm like, when I
In
got
New
a bit
York? Did you
emotional.
say New York? In New York?
Yeah, in New York, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I was thinking, man, it has had to happen now. As it makes me immensely hopeful, but what also makes me scared is in 2020 election, more rural white Americans voted for Trump than compared to in 2016. In 2020. Now, you would have thought that no, I mean this guy, he's gone case, and so
No, he still has this.
oh
There's
my
a
god.
huge difference between the rural areas, even in California, the
Mhm,
rural areas and the city areas. However, the rural areas are becoming less and less populated. The cities
mhm.
are becoming more and more populated. And as people for lower land prices are moving to swing states and red states, we're going to see more of a switch towards
But do
Democrats.
you see that the electoral college can now really screw things up?
Oh, I mean, the Electoral College has been screwing things up. It was created, for those of
Mhm,
you in my class who
mhm.
haven't seen the lecture. It was created because of slavery. It had to do
Could
with
you speak
slavery.
about that for Bangladeshi audience, please?
Yeah, yeah.
Bangladeshi,
So this is
some
how we
Bengali
can
people
start.
have been saying very great things about our your conversation. Wonderful speaker, enjoying her view of American politics.
Yeah, sure.
And Uttam is saying that impressive discussion. Also, very every sentence sounds so clear and well structured that it captivated me for the last half an hour. Thank you, Uttam. And
I miss
Ananda
seeing
is
all your
saying.
beautiful faces. I'm sorry I can't.
Yeah, and very interesting and constructive discussion. This is one of the things that I say to Bangladesh and people around the world. There is no such thing at the moment under neoliberal digital capitalism. Is that just because you're in California and my brother or my sister is from rural Bangladesh, there's no difference because the entire economy and somebody is working in Apple or in Google sitting in Bangladesh.
Yeah.
We have 600,000 Bangladeshis at the moment working as digital workers. Now, it makes me very hopeful and I smile from year to year. At the same time, my heart panics, sinks. You know why? Bangladesh has been the mecca of garments factory, clothing factories and all of that.
Oh, yeah.
We are not the owner of Gucci. We are not the owner of Prada. And I have worked with the, clothing factory workers, children education. I know for a fact is that, it kept on, the life kept on getting destroyed, doesn't happen. But what's happening is that the 600,000 workers in Bangladesh, they're working as digital workers. In America, you would have to pay thousands of dollars. But now you pay fraction of a price in Bangladesh, and you get, hey, I got my software engineer, I got my, website designer. So now the precariousness in America is gonna go worse, and this is what I'm telling you is that it makes me hopeful and also panicked. Chomsky is telling something us. He said that in many many meetings, is that he has seen America in 1930s in Great Depression, huge poverty. People didn't have food to eat, but somehow people were hopeful to struggle, to resist. And I don't know about your political activism. Is that but my shallow knowledge is that in 1960s there was a very robust anti-capitalist resistance in America.
Mhm.
That was, but Chomsky is warning us, saying that in 2021, what's scary is the apathy, is the hopelessness among the young people.
Yeah. I think that's changing though. That's what I'm
Mhm,
excited about. That's what they were
mhm,
talking about in this Harvard study, is
mhm.
that it's starting to change. And I have to thank Donald Trump because
You have to thank Donald Trump.
yes,
Can you
I think
can you
I
talk
have
about it, please?
very few things I thank him. One of them is that when he had an affair, he chose a woman a little closer to his own age. So at least, a woman in her 40s. That was, yay. I'm always trying to think of something positive. Wasn't an 18-year-old and or worse. And the other thing is he scared the hell out of us because young people, Americans in general, even you see homeless people often with cell phones. Like no matter how bad things are, people tend to be at a certain level. You don't really change until things become more uncomfortable by staying the same. And generally, people, even if things become a little more expensive or your life is a little more difficult, even in marriage, often people will be in a marriage, they're not so happy, but they're like, well, yeah. um, you kind of get used to a certain level where it's very hard. I mean, you're not going to really see revolution until people are literally starving, or like the Great Depression was getting close with 25% unemployment. The rich went tax us 90% just to get us out of this. So Donald Trump spewing all of this stuff against all these people of color, which make up a large part of the electorate, and just the things he said, the way, here's this, they really hoped for somebody like Bernie. Bernie gave them hope. And then they see this president, Donald Trump, and a lot of them didn't realize how dangerous it was. I think when Bernie wasn't the, when if Bernie's not the candidate, they start to think, well, what's the point? Why even vote? But then they go, well, wait a minute. It's not that they voted so much for Biden. They were just so excited to get rid of Donald Trump because he represented just such negativity and such corruption. And I think he's been a great inspiration because people are now becoming more activated and more engaged and more interested. They're paying more attention. And I'm sure it'll go down again. But 50% of young people voted, which is considered a huge success. I mean, it seems low, but it's high for young people, for 18 to 29. But you wanted me to talk about the Electoral College, and
Yeah,
I want,
yeah.
I'll briefly explain. And I didn't know other countries were using it. And then I discovered that Burma, I don't usually call it Myanmar because that's the military name, but Burma has a form of electoral college. But ours started the very founding of our country as a compromise because we wanted to have a lower house, a House of Representatives that represented, if you have more people, you have more House members. And then you have an upper house where every state, here we have 40 million people in California, 40 million people, we only get 2 senators. And you go to Alaska where there's mostly moose, there's maybe, I don't know, less than a million. It was 500,000 at one point. Beautiful state. I've been there. I love it. But they get two also. So two. Then you take the number of House members plus the number of senators, and that equals how many electoral votes you have. Well, slave states like Virginia, where Thomas Jefferson comes from, they said, well, wait a minute. We have large slave populations, but they're property. So they don't count. So we're not going to have hardly anybody in the House, and we're not going to have very many electoral votes, and we'll never get a president. And the compromise was, well, let's count them as 3/5 of a person. Did they get 3/5 of a vote? No, they got nothing. But we counted them as 3/5 of a person. So the Electoral College allowed us to count the slaves as 3/5 of a person. And then you take that number of representatives and add them to the Senate so that they could have more representatives and more representation in the Senate. But normally, what almost every country uses is you just count up the votes. Whoever has the most votes becomes the president. That's it. And in 2000, Al Gore got millions more votes. No, not millions more votes, but I think millions more votes. He got at least a million more votes, but he didn't get the votes in Florida. And we could talk for hours about what happened in Florida in 2000. But Al Gore did not become the president because he didn't get the electoral votes. In 2016, Trump normally wouldn't win because Hillary Clinton got 3 million more votes. But it doesn't matter that she got 3 million more votes. She didn't get them in the right places. She lost by 70,000 votes in 3 or 4 states. That's it. And Biden got those states. So Biden became president. So it doesn't matter who gets the most votes. It matters where you get the votes. So if you win a state by 1 vote, you get all the electoral votes for that state. In all states except Nebraska and Maine, they proportionalize. So you can win by 1 vote, you get all of the electoral votes. And we already know California's Democratic, so we have 53 House members plus 2 senators. In New York and Texas, we already know the states that are Republican. We already know the states that are Democrat. There's just a handful of swing states like Michigan and Ohio, Colorado, Wisconsin, that it's turning out to be Georgia, where we're not sure. And those are the only states anybody wants to campaign in because you only need 270 electoral votes to win. So
basically, can we also say that, and I'm going to be blunt about it, is that the electoral vote system was by design racist?
it was, but now the
Hmm.
reason it's supported is because if you're in a state like Wyoming, where you have almost no people, you have a lot of land, cows, you don't have a lot of people. If it was based on numbers, California and New York would wipe the floor with all the other states because we have 40 million people here. And Texas, there's a few states that have most people live in big cities and
Yeah,
most people live in certain states. So you have states that are just very rural and they have very few people, but they still get 3 electoral votes
yeah,
because they
yeah.
have 1 House
And
member and 2 senators. And that would end. It would be they would never agree to change the Constitution
so
because
that's my concern, because the rural America remains painfully unaware, or see, this is the point. If you look at the global rise in populism, white supremacy, is that the politicians, they have a very clever way to point finger. Oh, in America you don't have job because the Chinese are coming and taking it over. Oh, I mean, look at when Amazon wants to create a headquarter. Literally, the states compete. Is that state is giving billions of dollars to the richest man in I just read the Forbes report of 2021 richest 400. It broke my heart. In the history of human civilization, you never had such uneven income distribution. Never. Like, imagine that, and this is crazy. Just in about 1 year to the pandemic, the richest 400 people, their wealth has gone, I don't know how to make sense of it, is over 2 trillion, not billion, $2 trillion. Now,
I'll
yeah.
tell you how
Hmm.
everyone was home.
Hmm.
Nobody wanted to go out. Nobody was supposed to really go out.
Hmm.
So they ordered things to be delivered. And one of the most ordered things is Amazon sells everything.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
Amazon saw there a lot more people buy things.
Yeah.
At least for that one, I can speak to. I don't know the other richest people, but I know
Mhm.
that's how Jeff Bezos ended up making a lot more money
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it became more popular. Streaming services, people started watching more movies, so
Hmm.
Netflix did well. I mean, there's certain businesses that lend themselves. Zoom, I'm sure, is the richest company, one of the richest companies in the world now because everyone uses
but, but
Zoom.
but here's the trick though. These companies, They are producing services that will not nourish you. Your survival is not dependent on whether you are watching Netflix or not. But if you don't eat tomato food, you're going to die.
I know.
So the question is that being the richest is not my only concern, is that we are not able to tax the richest.
Yes.
And the problem is, for example, Jeff Bezos has become owner of more than $200 billion in 12 years, but in the United States the minimum wage has not changed from 750. Now that is a concern.
725. 725.
725,
Even
725.
worse.
So do you think that Biden, or, and this is where I think, and if I, of course, I don't have the capacity. If I had the capacity, I would make political science a compulsory course for all over the world.
I
I would
agree.
have told them is that, look, if I don't teach you political science, I will rob your life. You won't even know.
Yeah.
You won't even know. And we think that, oh, politics is only about shouting on the street, vote for this party or the other party. Now, could help us understand that how the corporate takeover of American politics has screwed American politics, and also neoliberal takeover of the global world order.
I mean, a lot of it is from the Supreme Court decisions that are allowing there. First of all, there's very few protections in the media now. We got rid of, um, we have monopolies like we've never seen before. And by the way, the original neoliberal founders supported restrictions on monopoly. Even the founder of capitalism, Adam Smith, did not believe in uh, unfettered corporations with monopolies. Generally, libertarians don't think monopolies are a good thing. They just think you're limited in terms of what you can do about it. But originally, it wasn't. Corporations weren't supposed to have one corporation that you had to go to for almost everything. Even our food. You're talking about food. Our food is corporatized. The greatest subsidies from the American government go to large agricultural firms, not the mom and pop farms. The mom and pop farms have to sell their land to turn into condos, which, by the way, we don't have water. We haven't even touched on drought. We don't have enough water for condos. We don't have enough water for food. Um, but the but what we subsidize, our majority of our subsidies go to large corporate agriculture farms, not the mom and pop that you see in the movies and everybody goes, oh, look how nice. They're struggling. They're having a very difficult time. They somehow thought that Donald Trump was going to save them. He's done nothing. I mean, if he had, I would say that was great, but he's done nothing for them. So things are looking kind of bleak in that area. And when it comes to climate change, I don't know if we can move fast enough, because it doesn't matter where you live, people won't exist anymore.
Do you think we
There's a way
can?
to cheer you up, cheer you all up out there. I mean, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful. Certainly, the infrastructure bill does some things, not enough, but it does some things. Neoliberal policies, oddly enough, seem, they're finding that there's profit in saving the environment. As long as you can prove there's profit. This is what drives me crazy about politics. When people vote, they often, like, there have been initiatives we've had that are like for the homeless or for whatever, and often people, they do studies, they do focus groups, and they go, that's not going to get the vote. You can't just say it'll help your brothers and sisters around in this state. You have to say how it'll affect them. So you have to say, you don't want to see homeless people sleeping on your doorstep, right? Because they're going to hurt you. You have to frame it that way. The death penalty. We had a proposition to end the death penalty, which failed. But the argument can't be that it's wrong for the government to kill people, and that often they kill an innocent person and it's too late. They're dead. You can't get them back. You can't frame it that way. You have to say, and it's true, we spend more on death penalty cases It's cheaper to just let them live the rest of their life in prison. So you have to make a financial argument. Everything has to be about how does it, find money, and how does it benefit you? It'll help you. You'll pay less taxes because we won't have to pay for all those court cases. And then there was another proposition competing that said, let's speed up the death penalty so we kill them quicker because that's cheaper. And that passed. I think that's still tied up in the courts, but that passed, not ending the death penalty. So,
We have a question from Dr. Snigdhar is one. Sorry, one comment from Sheila is it's really nice hearing her. She's so optimistic. I am a Californian just like her. Okay, yay. I was losing trust on human being after Trump got elected. I was actually inside the NY Glass building to see and celebrate Hillary Clinton to break the glass ceiling. Well, didn't happen. Maybe next time. So Dr. Snigdha is asking this question. She's a Bangladeshi anthropologist. Professor Snigdha is asking, it's amazing to listen to Dr. Denise Robb. It is particularly the analysis of American politics and equity and equality. However, could you please explore why America still struggled to have women president? And do you think it has a connection to Hillary's flaw?
okay, well, I think one of the problems is that when you poll people, they still aren't ready. When you do polls, they say people were more ready to have a black man president than a woman. So I think there's not just sexism, which is it's changing, right? We've got the Me Too movement, and when I was young, it was normal for a boss to grab you and ask you out and say inappropriate things, and that is changing. That is changing because people are bravely speaking out. But there's still this need to control women and to control their bodies, which is no better exemplified than all the anti-abortion laws and the possible Supreme Court decision taking away our autonomy, our bodily autonomy. And yeah, it hasn't. We're not there yet. And Hillary was probably not the best candidate. There's little things that she said throughout her career that really upset people. One one that I was just thinking about the other day was when they said something about her, you know, standing by Bill Clinton or something, or it wasn't about the affair. It was just about in general what her role is, because she was kind of like Eleanor Roosevelt in that she was given a seat at the table and she was in charge of policies. She wasn't just like Melania, I don't know, buying the curtains or something. She actually was supposed to be a substantive partner and a policy advisor. And she said things like, I'm not going to stay home and bake cookies. And she said it like that. You know, remember that thing I said a few minutes ago. They want to have a beer with you. Does anyone want to have a beer with Hillary Clinton? I mean, again, I'll tell you that I don't need to have a beer with any of them. I'd be fine with having a tea. I don't like beer, but tea with her. But people didn't want to have a beer with her. They didn't like her. She rubs people the wrong way. She doesn't come off as feminine, which is still considered important in politics. They generally think of the first lady as someone who imbues fashion, wears fashionable things, talks about decorating. And she's like me. I could care. I mean, I wear my Pierce college shirt almost every day and I'm fine. I like wearing the same things. I don't really care if it's fashionable. But, I'm not the image of the ideal female. Um, and we're not there yet. I read that in Bangladesh you set aside 50 seats in your it's not called a parliament, but the body, the parliamentary body, that's still the case, right? That you set aside 50 seats just for women. I mean, I know
Yeah.
you still only have you have about what we have, which is a
I
little over.
mean, I mean, we are much ahead of America because we have had women prime minister of the state since the '90s.
Yes,
So,
right. So
I mean,
you're ahead of us there. Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
Israel has had a female prime minister,
Yeah.
and there's
I don't know if you've heard of this a very pungent joke of Gandhi once he was in UK and he was asked by a journalist that, what do you think about the British civilization? And he answered, that would be a great idea.
I mean, yes, I remember that. I remember reading that.
So, and, it was right on point.
He has a
Um,
good sense of humor too. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. But
yeah.
by the way, he was, when it came to caste question, and this is what I say, that I don't want to throw the baby with the bathwater. So I will read Heidegger, but I'll also mention to my students that he supported Hitler. He supported, Nazi. I will talk about Kant, but I will also talk about that Immanuel Kant's idea of that, the whole idea, the philosophical position that created for example, the whole point you were talking about social Darwinism, that how that fueled a lot of racism subsequently. That, hey, here comes the white people and they are the race, on all of that. Uh, I think we,
All the founding theorists of American
yeah,
democracy, political theory, because political science used to be political theory, and
yeah.
that's what we used to study. And if you look at Aristotle, who supported slavery,
Hmm.
and then the main ones we teach are um, Hobbes, Locke, and
Hmm.
Rousseau,
Hmm.
all pretty sexist. When you look in, there's not even that much they write about women, but when they do, it's generally not very favorable.
Yeah.
Even Rousseau, who you think of as, the most liberal maybe of them, or the most optimistic of them, he thought women were a distraction.
Yeah.
There, this is throughout our history from medieval times until now. This idea that women are really a distraction. Women
Hmm.
are something that keeps you off the path. They make you, they make you have these feelings that make it
Hmm.
hard for you to think.
Hmm.
And also the idea that women are too emotional to have leadership roles, because when they're
Hmm.
on their period,
Hmm.
they're going to start wars. I can't see them starting any more wars than we've already started. We've been at
Hmm.
war for almost our entire history.
Hmm.
But that's the idea that, women won't be able to make rational decisions. And from the very beginning of feminism, they believed women weren't rational. Mary Wollstonecraft was brilliant because she actually said women need to be thought of as rational. Otherwise, why are you letting them raise children? They're
Hmm.
raising male and female children. They're the primary caregivers and the educators. And you're saying they're not rational? So how can you possibly say that? So, she brought to light a lot of important things. Women weren't even allowed to be involved in politics, to get an education, just like keeping slaves down by not letting them read.
Yeah. Yeah.
They didn't want women to read either,
Yeah.
because why?
Until 1975, women, in terms of what's that American judicial system, is that people, the jury,
Jury, women couldn't serve.
exactly.
Women couldn't serve on juries.
Yeah.
When I was born, women
Yeah.
couldn't get an abortion. When I was born,
1975. My country was independent in 1971.
yeah,
This is some of the things that we talk about. Obviously, these are the questions. I think we need to have a Zoom class someday with, if time permits you, is to understand the introduction of American politics. Is that basically how the electoral college work? How in terms of voting system work? What is gerrymandering? How
yeah.
in terms of when Obama got elected, we are in a post-racial society. I remember that famous line that today we are here. We're not a black America. We're not a white America. We're the United States of America. Oh my God, sounds so revolutionary. But here's a man who was most decisively successful when it comes to drone deployment, killing people, the most successful architect of deportation.
Deportation.
Even
Guess what?
Trump couldn't do that.
Joe Biden's
Yeah,
deporting more people than Trump.
exactly. There we go. There we go. This is
Oh,
these are
and
the
let's
things that
talk
we should
about
talk
why
about.
young people check out. Here's
Mhm.
another reason young people check out,
Mhm.
because they know those who are paying attention at all. They
Mhm.
know that Democrats and Republicans both get us into wars or don't take us out of wars.
Yeah.
We've been in their whole life, we've been at
Mhm.
war. And
Mhm.
of course, most people don't go to war. Only 1% of our population goes. So most people haven't experienced it, but they know we spent trillions of dollars on war. And they know that Democrats and Republicans equally are deporting people and aren't passing comprehensive immigration reform. And a lot of times, they go, oh, Joe Biden didn't do this. And they don't understand that with the filibuster in our country, one or two people can hold an entire legislative agenda hostage. So the president is limited in what they can do. But a lot of people don't know that. They don't understand how our government works. So they see nothing happening. And they see nothing happening because not because of the Constitution, but because of some crazy rules that we put into place over racism, over civil rights that are still in place, that we still have today. And neither Democrats or Republicans want to get rid of it because when they're the minority party, they use it too. They both use the filibuster to stop legislation. So they see there's only two parties, like Bangladesh too. There's two major parties, right? I mean, I know you have proportional representation for the women, which is really, I'd love to talk about that sometime. I want to know more about that. But we have two parties, and you may not fit into those parties. Even people in those parties, there's a lot of libertarians in the Republican Party. They don't care if you're gay or you want to have an abortion. They just don't want to pay any taxes. They've got money. And then there's the religious people who want to punish you and the doctor for an abortion, but they don't pay taxes. They're poor. They don't care about that. And they're in the same party. So we need a system like proportional representation so that we can get some more parties in there.
And America is very ready to. I mean, I was so proud when Kamala Harris became the vice president. Like, yay! And then when I remember, it's like, don't come. When she was saying is that don't come to the American border, and I was thinking, America has entirely screwed Latin America, destabilized the entire damn area. You have created war, you have thrown government. Look at CIA's hand in throwing away. I mean, how? I mean, I don't know. Again, I'm a teacher. I'm not gonna swear. Is that how the hell do you totally destabilize an area and then you say, "Don't come"? It's like I'm gonna go to your house and I'm gonna set your house on fire and then tell you, "Hey, don't get out of your house." Right? I mean, so I
I
think.
mean, the smart thing to do if we
Mhm,
don't have the resources for people coming is to
mhm,
offer some resources to people over there.
mhm.
That's what we need is a Marshall Plan for all the countries we've destabilized, not just in Europe. We need a Marshall Plan everywhere. I mean, look what we did to Iran. We
What
over
we, what
in
America has done to Middle East, what America has done to. Uh,
Afghanistan. I mean, it's weird. There, everybody's mad. We got out of Afghanistan. We were almost there. We're almost where? What? I mean, I'm glad we're gone. Although I do think we owe them a lot. But we have to stop using military. Just like this whole defund the police movement. It's a
Mhm,
worst. It's the worst PR ever. You
mhm,
should never call it that, and that's not what it is. It's shifting money to social services. We shouldn't be leading with military and with weapons. We should be leading with support. People don't need guns and they don't need their water supply to be destroyed and their electrical grid. And they're
mhm,
already living in the middle ages, and now we just throw them back to the beginning of time.
mhm.
They need food, they need water, they need electricity, they need housing. So if we want to prevent war, the smartest idea is to create a situation, and you want to prevent immigration and you want to prevent migration, is make life tolerable in other places. Help make life tolerable. If you spend trillions of dollars killing people, can't you spend $1 trillion helping people?
Yeah, and can we stop screwing the climate? What are you
Yeah.
gonna do? Like right now, if you look it up, Bangladesh has one of the highest risk in passport. Like, now I am an immigrant in Canada, and I know that when my Bangladeshi brothers and sisters who have to travel with a Bangladeshi passport, I used to joke about it. Is that when I would go through immigration and all that questions and everything, and I used to joke with my friends who would travel with me going to conferences. I say, this is a green passport. This is very radioactive. The immigration officers get triggered, right? And all of that. these are the things I
There's going to
think.
be there's going to be climate migrants like we've never seen before. And I worry my 10-year-old what kind of a world he's going to live in. And
Oh my God.
he
Oh
has
my
children.
God.
I
Oh my
picture a
God.
Mad Max movie,
Hmm.
Blade Runner type
Hmm.
situation where people are shooting each other for water and, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
oil or whatever is left,
Yeah.
and an apocalyptic hellscape. I
Uh,
just I don't know why people aren't more, you know, when they go to Scotland. In India says in the next 50 years, parts of India may not even exist in 50 years. And
a report
people
came
can't
out in,
breathe. They can't
yeah.
breathe right now.
Yeah. A report came out in Bangladesh 2019 by UNICEF that young girls are sold into prostitution because of climate change. What are they going to do? Nearly 19 million children. 19 million children. Look it up. It will break your
Because of
heart.
climate change? What
Yep.
how does that
because because the southern part of the country is going underwater. You have climate change, and what are they going to
you have
do?
to
Where are
get
they going to
out
go?
and they don't have
Yeah.
money to get.
and
Yeah,
and
rich
and
people go, "Just move." I heard someone say that the other day to me. They go, "Why don't they just move?"
move where? The thing is, when we try to cross the Indian border, and obviously if you look at India right now, the Trump of the south. We have Modi, a man who is making India. Look at the world right now. Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil, Duterte in Philippines. You have Modi in India. I mean,
There's a rise of authoritarianism that's
and
frightening.
it has a direct connection to the political economy of the global neoliberal economic system.
Yeah,
How would you not take interest in the political economy of your life?
yeah.
Like, how would you not? And then you
Because
have,
most people don't see the connections.
yeah, I think
And most
Bill,
people don't have time. Everyone's so busy working and raising their
and
families
distracted,
and
by the way,
distracted. But
and
yeah, it's
distracted
their
because
phones, but
we
they're
live in the
also,
time of attention economy. Tim Wu, Columbia University, is that for the first time in human history, your attention is the most profitable commodity.
yeah.
Your attention, not oil anymore, your attention. So if I
Probably the
colonize
smartest
your
thing to do is
consciousness,
turn your phone off for a few days a week.
yeah,
Don't check Facebook for a week, or a
yeah,
month, and unplug. There's a new movement to do that. And I think
yeah,
that's a really smart idea.
yeah,
Don't stop reading, but
mhm,
don't read just things on Twitter and
yeah,
Facebook and Instagram. Those are not YouTube. These are not news source. I mean, I know we're on YouTube, but generally that is not. I when people tell me they got their information from Twitter or YouTube, I'm like, do you understand that's a platform? That's not a news source. Maybe the person on it is respectable and reliable, but don't just assume if it's out there. I could make any kind of nonsensical video and do it in a serious way, and any fool could believe it. So you have to be a critical thinker. You
yeah,
have to be
yeah,
very careful.
yeah, yeah. Now, think about this. When we're saying that, in terms of YouTube, imagine when we didn't have Google, we would have to go to public library to source information.
I remember that.
What's happening? Google is replacing public library. Every single question, nearly 90% of Google's revenue comes from giving you the answer. 90% of Google's revenue.
I'll just
And in
asking a
20,
question
yeah,
on there and
yeah, yeah. And in 2020, probably the only black artificial intelligence ethics woman officer, AI expert, Dr. Gibro, got fired when she has written a paper saying, well, Google's algorithm is racist. When you ask a question, there's a wonderful book. It's called The Algorithm of Oppression by Sophia Noble. It's a beautiful, beautiful, easy read. Anybody should be able to read it. It's just that, for instance, when you write, now Google has changed a lot of things, is that if you would write black woman, the
yeah,
first result
I
that would
saw
be
that. I
given,
saw that.
yeah.
Right.
You see what I mean? Yeah.
Or
So,
if you Google beautiful, a white woman comes up. The
If
idea
you
of
would write black woman, it will serve you pornographic video
yeah,
because black women's body is disposable, it's fetishized. So
yeah,
the thing is, the empire, I agree with you that I will, as long as I breathe, I will never lose hope.
good.
But as a social science researcher, as a teacher, I really don't believe that our leaders will come to senses. It has almost become comical.
I know.
Captain, this is what's going on. I mean, we need to have more conversation, Dr. Rob. We have
Yeah.
almost finished 1 hour 40 minutes.
Oh,
We
really?
have
How long
barely.
is it supposed to go?
No. We need to have like regular conversation. But I think
We
what's
don't
what's
have we don't have
important.
a set hour or whatever.
Yeah, and no.
Oh,
One of the things that we need to do is understand that we need to build a global solidarity, because one of the things that I have learned from Black radical tradition is that the liberation, especially the Black intellectuals in the United States, they have great tradition of internationalism, because capitalism does not live in New York or in California. America is the whole goddamn world. So it's not. So unfortunately, you won't see many collaborations. And also, when collaborations in terms of, like, I was born in a small village. I'd have to walk 8 miles to go to school, and I'm the first in my 11 siblings to attend university. So I come from margin. I
wow.
come from.
Yeah.
So when you were talking about agriculture, I was thinking, yeah, I grew up, raising animals, growing crops. So I know it's hard.
Yes, right. No, I know. It's just, from my perspective from a big city, that's
Yeah,
not most people don't even know. I'm like, this is an apple. What? Is
yeah, yeah.
that's an
Yeah,
apple?
so
Yeah.
yeah, we need to. Please let me know if we can have a conversation. If you on Zoom, obviously, so that other students
Sure.
can directly participate. Is that if you could give us an introductory class on American politics, like you were saying, filibuster.
Well,
I
I
know
mean,
in Bangladesh,
it's 16
students won't
weeks.
understand.
It's a 16-week class, but I could give some basics if you want.
No, however long you can, because then it's important that if we can, because in the from the margin in Bangladesh, we can afford to come to America for a class. We can afford to pay. We are struggling. You know what I mean. But
Do
there, this is what yeah.
well, it's I know it's probably considered expensive, but community college
Mhm,
is you can take our online classes from I
mhm,
think anywhere, right? I think
mhm, mhm.
anywhere.
But
Um,
your fees are different, if you're international, and also,
oh, that's
I
right.
mean,
It's
yeah,
not
yeah.
$46 a unit
Oh
if
my
you're
God, no. No. We can't. This is one of the things. The goal of this platform is that collaborating with the scholars, activists, community, organizers, to create a global solidarity,
yeah,
because the crisis of neoliberal capitalism is not a crisis of United States of America. It's a
yeah,
global crisis.
right.
And let's not forget that the academia has been co-opted by neoliberal forces beyond at a scale beyond our imagination. So if we don't resist, this is what Chomsky wrote: the roles of intellectuals, right? I
Mhm.
mean, what are we doing? So
Yeah, no, I'm
yeah,
happy to do it. I was just thinking it would be nice if they could get credit for it.
yeah, yeah. We will speak more about it, and you will see the reality. So
Yeah.
we look forward to have future conversation with you, Dr. Rob, and all of our audience who have been with us so far asked wonderful questions. Thank you very much, and tune in. you
Thank
know
you.
uh,
Yeah, thanks for joining us. I'm
yeah,
sorry I didn't get to meet you all, but hopefully on Zoom maybe we can see each other.
yeah, yeah. And like, I always quote Chris Hedges, is that resist, 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 because otherwise we don't have any other option. So
Yeah.
thank you. A
Thank
wonderful
you.
day. Bye
You
bye.
too.
Bye.